Hi guys, so today we're going to do part 4 of our series, how to start or bootstrap a STEM business. And as we've said before, this works for any business that you're considering starting and getting going. Now, as you realize, I'm doing this from my car today. So today was a busy day. We had to intersperse some personal business and regular business. So for instance, we had to take our dog to the vet, and so that disrupted our normal operations and my normal time at the lab. And so it also disrupted my scheduled time to make this video. So which means I had to find some time in which to fit this video in during my work day. And it just so happens that, getting at home, staying in the parking lot, getting this done is just an appropriate time. When I'm done here, something else may get on my list that we need to do before the night is over. Again, it all goes back to being an entrepreneur, running your own business. Sometimes you have to make adjustments. Sometimes you have to shift stuff around. But whatever it takes, if you're going to be in business, you have to be creative. You have to make adjustments. You have to be flexible to get all your tasks that you want done during the day. So, as we said, we're going to talk about today, again, how to bootstrap a STEM business. And so in the past videos, we've talked about setting up your business plan, setting your day. So we talked about some operations, finding a place to do business. So today we want to talk about what does a typical day look like. And maybe I should say that there are no typical days. But so we've talked about sales, we've talked about finances, where do you get your capital? So what about how do you plan a day when you're bootstrapping a business? And so for this, I can only go back to my experience. Again, this is a service business called American Analyticals, the business of which I'm president, and it's a laboratory testing service business. So let me use this time that if you're in the supplements industry, if you're a manufacturer and you have products that you need to be tested as is required by regulation, please find us. We are called American Analyticals, and we'll be happy to talk to you about how we can go about testing your products to make sure that they are compliant. So what does a typical day look like when you're bootstrapping a business? Now, so for this, I'll have to go back several years. Back in 2008, 2009, when we began this business, for me, I'm big on task. So I've always planned my day, list the 5 to 10 things I want to get done in that day. And I would divide up that time and try to get as much of everything that I have on my schedule done. In hindsight, what I should have done is take half of the day and use that for sales and marketing, and then fit everything else in the other half of the day. That's not what I did. What I did when we began our business was simply I would prospect. So again, I would take the phone up, start our sales calls, look for customers, find customers, qualify customers, give them the sales pitch. Once we got a customer, then I would then go back to the lab, start testing, get the project out, and then start the cycle again. That, I thought, in hindsight, was the wrong approach. And so what I would encourage you to do instead is put a little bit more systems in place. 2 things: work on the business and work in the business. What I did was I would work on the business and as soon as I got a customer, or a project, I should say, then I would work in the business. And notice that working on the business would stop because I'm now working in the business to fulfill that contract or to complete that project. And so what I would do differently now is I think I would take half of each day, typically in the mornings, and I would set aside that first 4 hours for sales and marketing activities. Again, notice I use the word activities. I would set aside that first 4 hours for sales and marketing activities. If you don't have a partner, or even if you have a partner, at least one of you should be involved heavily. At least half of your day, in my opinion, should be spent on sales and marketing activities. If you're starting a one-person operation, I think it's even more vital that at least half of your day, half of your time be spent on sales and marketing activities. You have to keep your pipeline full. And so if I had to do it over again, I would dedicate at least 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours every day, Monday to Friday, just on sales and marketing activities. And sales activity could include and should include prospecting for new customers, trying to find qualified leads. Again, whether it means searching through trade journals, getting online, putting in specific keywords, looking for the people or the customers that are in your industry, getting their contact information, whether it's email or telephone numbers, and cold calling. Again, I think I mentioned that a lot of people do not like to cold call, but I use it every time and it works for me. So I would spend some time prospecting, getting those customers, getting a customer list together, and I tend to separate it. So I tend to spend time prospecting, getting that customer list, and then maybe the next day or later on in that day, I'll start making my cold calls. Again, so whatever works for you, you should have some time separated or dedicated to generating leads, making contact in some form or fashion, prospecting, marketing activities. If you prefer to do marketing activities, again, feel free to do whatever is necessary, whether it's sending out mailings or sending out emails or making brochures, working on your website, whatever it is that falls under marketing, producing content, getting you the word out about your business. I do believe that you should spend a significant amount of time doing that. Again, because you have to keep your pipeline full. One of the mistakes that I made in doing our business that I see was a mistake now, and I may have alluded to this in a previous video, was that we would get a project, we would get a customer, we would fulfill that project, get that out of the door, and then we go back to zero because I was only fulfilling a customer's needs and then picking up the phone again and starting all over again. So combine that, spend half of the day prospecting, marketing activities, and then move on to actual operations. So once you have done that, what is the rest of your day looking like? Now, for us at Colmeric Analyticals, what that looks like is serving the customer. Sometimes it is answering the phones or responding to email from customers. In my case now, it's also responding to my employees' needs. So it's not just customer needs, but it's also the needs of the employees. Making sure that they have the reagents and the equipment and everything is in working order. But if I had to go back several years, again, when we didn't have as many employees, it was just me, what typically would happen is, I would go ahead, plan a project, then figure out all the inventory that I need, the chemical inventory that I needed to do a project. I would plan that project, find the vendors, order the products that I needed to fulfill a project. And initially when I started, I thought about, and what I did, I tried buying in bulk to save some money, but that did not work for me. What happened is I end up using a lot of my money and I'll have bulks of materials, but it was only for one project. And so by the time the next project came around, I was short on cash because I had spent, a lot of that previous funds trying to make sure we had more than enough reagents and chemicals to do the actual test for the previous project. What you should have done, or what I should have done then was, and what I started to do after I figured out I was just wasting money, was I planned these projects, and if, for instance, if a project required that I use 500 mLs. We call it milliliters. Note, we're not saying gallons. It's 500 mLs or milliliters of something, of a reagent, whether it's acetic acid, methanol, acetonitrile. Then what I would do is I would see what the vendors were offering. If I needed 500, then if they had a package size of 1000 mLs, then that's what I would buy. So I would have enough for my project, and I would have more just in case something went wrong that we could retest, or that I would have enough for a second project that may come up a month or two from them. And then I began to do that for every project. And so now I had more money, more funds available for when projects came, as opposed to having used all the funds to fulfill one project and then trying to figure out where I would get funding for the next project. So the simple things as operations, we had to figure that out as we go along. So now what I would suggest is not just work on the business, but work also in the business. Now, working on the business for me now means setting up systems so that you become more efficient. And the more efficient you are as a small business owner, then the more profitable you are. And so we began to set up systems in that look at your process. What is required to adequately serve your customer? So in our case, since we are delivering certificates of analysis and we are delivering reports to a customer, once we get a project, in our case, our projects comes in terms of samples that a manufacturer would send to us. And so we set up a system for logging in that sample. How do we log and store that sample before it's ready for testing? What information should we send to the customer so that when he sends a project into us or he sends a sample in for us to test, that they have that information fully documented? Otherwise, if they don't have that, we would then have to get on the phone and call and try to find someone to ask, hey, what exactly did you want tested? So we developed a system of how do we log samples that come to our facility. And so we came up with a chain of custody form. And then we have a logbook. Or if it's more electronic, you have what is called a lab management information system. And so everything is captured into your system, whether it's digital or it's analog. You want a system to capture that information about that product, the test that's required before it moves into the testing phase. So you do need systems. And then to go from receiving the sample to actually testing the sample, you also need some systems. Well, you need standard operating procedures. And again, that's all part of working in the business. Working on the business, setting up that system. So you need standard operating procedures to guide you as to what tests should be done for a particular product so that it's adequately tested and the test is of scientific significance or it's valid. So you need a system to move your product from receiving to lab operations. And then you need another system to how do I get my report once that product is tested and reviewed and documented. How do I get that report to the customer? And so if you're going to send it in email, then you need a standard operating procedure to say how you're going to do that. You're going to need a standard operating procedure outlining what your certificate of analysis or your report should look like. So it is a standardized form so that you're not inventing your reports every time you have to send a report. And so again, those are having systems in place to make your product or to make your processes simpler and simpler. And the more simple your product is, again, the more efficient you are and the more the profits you're going to have. All right. So you need systems to make sure that your products, your operations work smoothly. And if you're a small business, of course, you may need to spend time working in the business. So if you're going to work, and so that's why for me, I always say that it comes back to your skill set. If you have a basic skill set about the operations and the business you're in, it takes away a lot of the stress, because you can just move seamlessly between working on your business and working in the business, because you're already an expert. You already have a level of expertise if you're going to do that business and work the business by yourself until you can hire more people. Now, fortunately for us at Calmeric Analyticals, we are at the point where we now have employees. And so even though today was a day that I had to be flexible and get out of the office and do some personal errands, we were still able to have that business going without me being there, because we have systems set up. We actually have systems that allows the lab manager to take products from sample submission, work on a product with the instrumentation, put that through the quality compliance process, and we have a manager that does that and send reports out while I'm not in the office. And so, but again, that takes time and that takes effort. And if you're going to be doing it and bootstrapping it, you need to do a lot of this work yourself in the initial phase of your business. Now, that takes me to the other point where, there people talk about work-life balance and how much time should you spend working in your business. Well, for me, it's quite clear. If you're going to be bootstrapping your business and you're going to be doing sales and marketing, and you're going to try and conserve as much cash as you have, so that now you're going to also work in the business, well, the only thing it seems like is that you have is time, and you have to make time to get the business done. And so in our case, in my case, working 7 days per week, every week for that first year in business was simply what we did. Or in my case, it's simply what I did. 7 days per week, I worked in the business. Sunday to Saturday, I worked in the business. And many a times, I was in the lab, in the office at 10 or 11 o'clock, and a few times worked right up till midnight, got up the next day and started the process over again. So, if you're going to do this business, if you're going to run a business, if you're going to bootstrap a business and you're concerned about work-life balance, or whatever that means, you may want to reconsider. I'm going to do a video dealing with work-life balance and what my thoughts are and that. But for me, all I can say right now is that if you're going to do business, you're going to bootstrap your business, you may want to at least spend as much time understanding your customer, understanding your processes, putting in systems and processes in place, working in the business until such time that you can afford to have employees to help you grow that business. Up until then, I would recommend becoming an expert in as many aspects, or at least one aspect of your business. Every part of your business should not be something you're learning when you're bootstrapping a business. You need to be an expert at something. There should be something in that business that you're just completely comfortably doing. In my case, I was comfortable in the lab. I was comfortable finding the test method, working out the chemistry, and delivering accurate results to our customers. The rest of it I had to figure out as to, okay, let me put standard operating procedures in place. Oh, let me figure out my taxes. Let me get with the accountant. Let me get with the legal. Let me find an attorney to help me interpret this contract. So those are the things that I sought help in, was the business, the finance, the taxing, the tax side of it, the legal side of it. But the actual core of the business of being in the lab, working in the lab, that was where I was an expert on. And so once you figure out, I would say that you need to be an expert in some aspect of your business if you're going to bootstrap your business and make it a viable long-term business. All right, so just in wrapping up today, again, put systems in place so that you're working on the business, and use those systems to then work in the business. And if you do that, you're going to find that over time you're going to succeed. But you have to put in the time. I cannot stress this enough. You have to put in the time. Bootstrapping a business, a STEM business, or any other business requires dedication and commitment. You have to learn your craft. You need to be an expert in some aspect of your business so that you can move your business forward. All right, until next time, have a great day. Hope to see you soon.